An injured puppy was about to be put down. Then the vet reads its collar. What should have been a routine mercy kill turns into a shocking discovery. The collar carries a warning no one expected, and suddenly this isn't just about saving a dog, it's about uncovering a deadly secret. Powerful forces demand the puppy's silence, and when the vet refuses, the fight spirals into sabotage, threats, and life-or-death danger. But the closer she looks, the clearer it becomes. This animal holds the key to something someone would burn everything to hide. Why would anyone want this puppy gone so badly? And when the truth finally comes out, who will survive it? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The glass door of Maple Ridge Veterinary Clinic burst open, letting in a blast of icy wind and a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His fingers trembled as he practically threw a medium-sized dog onto the examination counter, making the metal surface rattle. Dr. Hollis Ray rushed forward from her office, her heart jumping at the rough handling. The shepherd pup landed with a whimper that made her chest tighten. Through the acrid smell of smoke that clung to its fur, she could see angry red patches where fire had singed the animal's coat. "Here's payment," the courier barked, slapping down a stack of crumpled bills. His hands shook as he added a folded note. "Instructions are clear. Put it down. Now." Hollis kept her voice steady despite the anger building in her throat. "Sir, I'll need to verify. Just do it." He backed away, bouncing on the balls of his feet like he couldn't stand still. Hollis ignored him, focusing on the trembling pup. Its eyes were bright with fear but alert, a good sign despite the obvious trauma. As she ran gentle hands over its body, checking vitals, her fingers found a leather collar partially hidden by the singed fur. Standard procedure required owner verification before any major procedure. She turned the collar, looking for ID tags, and her breath caught. There, branded into the leather, was Y4, Kindred Stock. The name hit her like a physical force. Everyone in the county knew the Kindred name and their reputation for premium breeding stock. But it was the metal plate on the back that made her pause. No euthanasia without owner's signature. Policy on file. Report injuries. The courier cleared his throat. "Lady, you got your payment and instructions. Get on with it." Hollis straightened, squaring her shoulders. "I can't do that. This collar clearly states no euthanasia without the owner's signature. It's registered policy. Look, I got my orders, which directly contradict the official policy attached to this animal." She kept her voice firm but professional. "I'll need proper authorization from Kindred Stock before proceeding with any irreversible procedures." The man's face twisted. Without another word, he spun and bolted through the door, letting in another blast of winter air. The bell above the entrance jangled violently in his wake. Hollis immediately turned her attention back to her patient. The pup's breathing was labored, but not critically so. She could see burns along its flank, painful but not life-threatening with proper treatment. Whatever had happened, euthanasia was certainly not medically necessary. "Easy there, sweet one," she murmured, preparing a mild sedative. "Let's get you comfortable and cleaned up." As she worked, her mind raced. The Kindreds were one of the most powerful families in the region. Their breeding program was legendary, producing some of the finest working dogs in the state. Why would someone try to put down one of their pups through such shady means? The sleet picked up outside, needling against the windows like tiny bullets. Inside, under the bright examination lights, Hollis carefully documented every injury. Burns along the left side, smoke inhalation evident in the lungs, minor cuts on the paws, consistent with running through rough terrain. The pup remained remarkably calm under her touch, but she noticed its head kept turning toward the door, as though expecting someone. "You've got somewhere to be, don't you?" she asked softly, scratching behind its ears. "Well, you're safe here for now." After administering antibiotics and applying burn ointment, she prepared a kennel with soft blankets. The sedative had taken effect, but the pup's eyes remained surprisingly alert, still watching the door between long blinks. Hollis pulled out her phone and the clinic's policy binder. Sure enough, There was the kindred stock agreement, complete with emergency contact numbers. Her finger hovered over the first number as she glanced at the wall clock, nearly 10 o'clock at night. This call would cause waves. The kindreds didn't take kindly to people interfering in their business. But that collar's inscription was clear, and her oath as a veterinarian was clearer. She couldn't ignore a legitimate policy to follow an anonymous note, no matter how much cash accompanied it. The phone felt heavy in her hand as she dialed. Each ring echoed in the quiet clinic, punctuated by the steady drumming of sleet against the windows. The pup whined softly from its kennel, and Hollis wished she could explain that she was trying to help. While waiting for an answer, she did one final walk-through of the clinic. Every window locked, security system armed, cameras recording. Her footsteps echoed in the empty building as she checked each room. The night pressed against the windows, dark and wild with winter storm. Back in her office, she settled in for a long night. The pup would need monitoring, and she wanted to be present when the kindreds responded, one way or another. She pulled up the patient file she'd started and began typing her detailed notes, making sure every observation and decision was thoroughly documented. The sleet continued its assault on the windows, but inside, the only sounds were the gentle hum of heating vents and the occasional soft whimper from her mysterious patient. Hollis glanced at the stack of bills the courier had left, still lying untouched on the counter. Blood money, she thought grimly. Not at her clinic. Not ever. She'd taken an oath to protect and heal. Sometimes that meant standing firm when others tried to push her into crossing lines she'd drawn long ago. The pup's eyes met hers through the kennel door, trust beginning to replace fear, and she knew she'd made the right choice, whatever consequences might come. Looking at her phone again, Hollis squared her shoulders. She'd dealt with pressure from powerful clients before. This time wouldn't be different. She had policy, procedure, and documentation on her side. More importantly, she had her principles. Outside her window, the winter storm raged on, but Hollis felt strangely calm. She'd chosen her path the moment she'd read that collar's inscription. Now all she could do was wait and protect the injured creature in her care. The pup had finally drifted into a deeper sleep, though even now its ears twitched at every sound from the direction of the door. Hollis settled in her chair, prepared for a long night of monitoring vital signs and waiting for responses to her call. Whatever storm was coming, both literally and figuratively, she would face it head-on, just as she always had. This wasn't the first time she'd stood her ground against pressure to bend her principles, and she doubted it would be the last. But looking at the sleeping pup, watching the gentle rise and fall of its chest, she knew some lines were worth defending, no matter the cost. The night stretched ahead, full of questions she couldn't answer yet. Why had someone wanted this pup euthanized against official policy? What had caused the burns and smoke damage? Where had the courier come from, and who had sent him? The answers would come, but for now, her job was simply to heal and protect. Hollis checked the pup's vital signs one more time, adjusted its blanket, and settled in for the wait. The sleet continued its steady percussion against the windows, nature's own testimony to the wild night that had brought this unexpected patient to her door. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she knew she'd sleep soundly, knowing she'd honored her oath and her conscience. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, marking time in the quiet clinic. Hollis began organizing her documentation, knowing that every detail might prove important in the coming days. The unsigned note, the courier's behavior, the timing of it all. Something wasn't right, and her instincts told her this was just the beginning. The harsh fluorescent lights of the clinic cast long shadows across the floor as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. Hollis had just finished checking the pup's vitals when the sharp click of heels against tile announced an unexpected visitor. Iona Vale swept into the clinic like a winter wind, her designer coat still pristine despite the weather. Her face wore the kind of polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her, a nervous-looking county clerk shuffled in, clutching a leather portfolio to his chest. "Dr. Ray." Iona's voice carried the practiced warmth of someone used to getting their way. I understand you're holding one of our animals. Hollis straightened, maintaining a professional distance. Yes, Mrs. Vale. A shepherd pup was brought in last night with severe smoke inhalation and burns. A defective animal, Iona corrected smoothly. One that should have been humanely euthanized hours ago. We can't risk a scandal if word gets out about the condition it's in. The county clerk cleared his throat. Dr. Ray, there could be licensing complications for non-compliance with owner requests. He shifted uncomfortably, not meeting her eyes. Hollis walked to the counter and picked up the collar she'd removed from the pup. The owner's policy is quite clear, she said, turning it to show the engraved instruction. No euthanasia without owner's signature. The note I received was unsigned. I'm here to sign now, Iona said, reaching for a pen. You're not listed as an authorized signatory on the policy, Hollis replied firmly. I've already begun treatment, and the pup is responding well. From the kennel area, a weak whine drew their attention. The pup had managed to stand, pressing against the gate and staring intently at the exit. It had been doing that all night, as if trying to tell them something. Iona's smile tightened. Dr. Ray, surely you understand the position this puts us in. The animal is damaged. Putting it down is the sensible choice. What I understand, Hollis said carefully, is that proper procedures exist for a reason. I'm continuing treatment as per the policy instructions. The clerk shuffled forward again. The board takes compliance very seriously, Doctor. Your license renewal is coming up. Are you threatening my license for following documented policy? Hollis asked quietly. The clerk stepped back, flushing. Iona's facade cracked slightly. This is completely unnecessary. That animal should have been destroyed the moment it arrived. Why the rush? Hollis asked. Why send an unsigned note and cash with a courier instead of following standard procedures? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Iona's perfectly manicured fingers tightened on her purse strap. After they left, Hollis reached for her phone. She needed backup, someone who wouldn't dismiss her concerns. Her fingers found Wren Markham's number automatically. Wren, it's Hollis. I could use your eyes on something. His voice came through steady and familiar. What's going on? She explained the situation. The courier, the unsigned note, Iona's visit, the clerk's veiled threats. Something's not right here, Wren. This isn't just about an injured pup. Never is when people push this hard. He agreed. I'll swing by after my patrol. Document everything in the meantime. Already on it, Hollis said, grateful for his immediate understanding. She'd lost count of how many times others had dismissed her instincts as overcautious or paranoid. Wren never had. After hanging up, she returned to her detailed documentation. Every observation, every interaction, every treatment decision went into the record. The courier's note and abandoned cash were carefully bagged and labeled. Chain of custody would be crucial if this turned into a legal battle. The pup's breathing had improved with oxygen therapy, though it still sounded ragged. Hollis noted its continued fixation on the exit. Not the anxious pacing of a stressed animal, but something more purposeful. As if it knew exactly where it needed to go. She studied the unsigned note again. The demand for immediate euthanasia nagged at her. Someone stood to benefit from this death, someone who couldn't wait for proper channels. But who? And why? Setting up overnight monitors to track the pup's vital signs, Hollis finally allowed herself to rest on the small cot she kept for emergency cases. The oxygen concentrator hummed steadily, a counterpoint to the pup's gradually strengthening breaths. Outside, the storm had settled into a quiet drizzle. Hollis listened to the gentle patter, her mind turning over the day's events. Iona's pristine appearance and barely concealed anger. The clerk's rehearsed threats. The mystery courier who'd vanished into the night. The pup whined softly from its kennel, and Hollis murmured reassurance. It's okay, little one. We'll figure this out. She'd faced pressure before, but something about this felt different. Bigger. The rush to destroy evidence, because that's what this felt like, spoke of deeper troubles than a simple injured animal. The monitors beeped steadily, showing improving oxygen levels. Whatever tomorrow might bring, at least she'd given this creature a fighting chance. Hollis closed her eyes, knowing sleep would be light and interrupted by regular checks, but necessary. In the quiet of the clinic, broken only by mechanical hums and animal breathing, she could almost convince herself this was just another emergency case. But the weight of the unsigned note in her desk drawer and the memory of Iona's cold eyes told her otherwise. This was just the beginning, and she'd need every bit of backup she could get. Thank goodness for Wren's promised visit. Sometimes standing your ground was easier with someone watching your back. The pup's breathing grew steadier under the oxygen, each breath stronger than the last. Whatever it was trying to tell them with its determined focus on the exit would have to wait until morning. For now, healing was the priority. Hollis adjusted the blanket in her cot, positioned to keep the kennel in clear view. Years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts. Tonight, those instincts were screaming that there was more to this case than smoke inhalation and burns. Much more. But those were questions for tomorrow. Tonight was for healing, monitoring, and gathering strength for whatever battles lay ahead. The pup sighed softly in its sleep, finally resting easier, and Hollis allowed herself to do the same. The first rays of dawn filtered through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the examination room. Hollis had been up every 2 hours checking on the shepherd pup, and now, in the clear morning light, she noticed something she'd missed in the chaos of the previous night. Dark, sticky patches matted the dog's fur in places untouched by smoke or fire. Hollis frowned, reaching for a pair of gloves. As she parted the singed fur, tiny glints caught her eye. She carefully extracted several slivers of glass, holding them up to the light. The edges were smooth, uniform, tempered glass, the kind used in windows and doors. "This doesn't add up," she muttered, depositing the fragments into an evidence bag. The tarry residue stuck to her gloves as she worked, its chemical smell distinct from ordinary smoke damage. Her stomach tightened. These weren't the kinds of injuries you'd see in a simple barn fire. The clinic door chimed, and Hollis heard Wren's familiar footsteps in the hallway. She'd never been so glad to see his weathered face appear in the doorway. "Morning, Doc," he said, taking in the scene. "What have we got?" Hollis gestured him closer. "Look at this." She showed him the bagged glass fragments and pointed out the sticky residue. "I've treated plenty of fire victims. This isn't typical smoke damage." Wren pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "No, it's not. This looks like accelerant residue. And these glass fragments..." He examined them closely. "They're not from a random broken window. This is safety glass, the kind that shatters in a specific pattern." "Like someone broke through a door or window?" Hollis asked. "Exactly. And the way these burns are concentrated." Wren studied the pup's injuries. "It's like the fire followed a path. A corridor, maybe. They spent the next hour collecting samples and photographing everything." The pup remained unusually calm throughout the examination, those intelligent eyes following their movements. "Someone really wants this dog gone," Wren said finally, straightening up. "Question is, why?" Hollis shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm not letting them succeed." That night, after a long day of treating regular patients while keeping the shepherd under close observation, Hollis finally headed home. The clinic was quiet, secure, or so she thought. The phone call came at 3 a.m. The security company's automated message jolted her awake, motion detected at the clinic's back entrance. When she arrived 15 minutes later, Wren was already there, flashlight beam cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The back door stood ajar, its frame splintered. Inside, chaos reigned. Files lay scattered across the floor, drawers hung open, and a cabinet's lock was bent almost completely backward. "They were looking for something specific," Wren said, photographing the damage. "This wasn't random vandalism. Hollis checked on the shepherd pup first, thankfully unharmed, though agitated. The break-in had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Someone was getting desperate. After giving their statements to the local police, Hollis decided to move the pup to a secure facility for the emergency exam she'd scheduled. Wren insisted on following her truck in his vehicle. The sun hadn't yet risen as they wound their way up the mountain road. Hollis's headlights cut through the lingering darkness, illuminating the sharp drop-offs beside the narrow road. The shepherd pup watched attentively from its crate in the passenger seat. She was halfway down a steep grade when she felt it. The brake pedal went straight to the floor with no resistance. Her heart stopped. The truck picked up speed. Hollis pumped the brakes frantically, but nothing happened. The ravine loomed closer as the truck fishtailed on the wet pavement. Behind her, Wren's headlights flashed urgently. She fought to keep the truck on the road, using the gears to slow her momentum, but physics was working against her. Just as the truck's rear wheels started to slide towards the edge, she felt an impact. Wren had pulled alongside, wedging his vehicle against hers. The added friction helped slow her descent until both vehicles finally ground to a halt, mere yards from the ravine's edge. Hollis sat frozen, hands locked on the steering wheel, breath coming in short gasps. She could feel bruises forming where the seatbelt had caught her. From the crate, the shepherd pup pressed against the bars, whining softly, not in fear, but almost protectively. Wren yanked open her door. "Hollis, are you okay?" She nodded shakily. "The brakes, they just went out. This wasn't an accident," Wren said grimly, already checking under the truck with his flashlight. "Look here, brake line's been cut, clean through." Hollis stared at the ravine, then at the pup still straining toward her through the crate bars. Someone had tried to kill them both. The reality of it hit her hard. "They're trying to silence us," she said quietly. "But why? What does this dog know?" Wren helped her out of the truck. "That's what we need to find out. Let's get you both somewhere safe, then I'm calling in some favors. This just became a criminal investigation." Hollis nodded, her resolve hardening. Someone had just tried to kill her to keep this dog's secrets buried. But they'd failed. And now she was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. "We need to document everything," she said, straightening despite her bruised body. "I want a full emergency exam done on this pup. Every injury, every piece of evidence logged and photographed. Someone's trying to erase a trail, and this dog is the key to finding it." The shepherd pup's whine had turned to a low, steady growl, not threatening, but protective. Whatever secret it carried, whatever it had witnessed, Hollis would find out. Someone had just made this very personal. Back at the clinic, Hollis spread the patient files across her desk, fingers trembling slightly as she traced the Y4 brand listings. The records told a clear story, one that made her stomach clench. The injured pup came from a prize litter, born to Kindred's top breeding pair just 3 months ago. The same litter that had been housed in the east wing of the broodmare barn, the very wing where the fire started. "Look at this," she said to Wren, who stood examining the scattered papers. 6 pups, all marked with tracking codes. This one, she tapped the shepherd's file, was scheduled for specialized training. Value listed at $15,000. Wren leaned closer, frowning. So why try to destroy a valuable asset? Unless the pup saw something they needed to hide. Hollis murmured. The shepherd watched them intently from his kennel, ears pricked forward. "We need to keep him safe and documented until we figure this out," Wren said. "I know a magistrate who might help." Judge Morton proved sympathetic to their concerns, especially given the evidence of tampering and assault. Within 2 hours, they had an emergency order declaring the pup material evidence in a potential arson investigation. "This buys us time," Wren explained as they left the courthouse, "but it also puts us under more scrutiny. We need somewhere more secure than the clinic." He drove them to an old feed store on the outskirts of town, its weathered walls solid despite their age. "Owner's a friend. There's a reinforced storage room in back, used to hold valuable stock medicines. Multiple locks, no windows." Hollis helped him transfer the kennel and supplies. The pup settled quickly in the dim room, but his eyes never left her, tracking her every movement with laser focus. "I'll take first watch," Wren offered. "Try to get some rest." But rest proved impossible. Shortly after 2 o'clock, a sharp knock echoed through the building. A man in an expensive suit stood at the door, briefcase in hand. "Representatives of Kindred Ranch," he announced smoothly. "We're here to collect their property." Hollis examined the papers he thrust forward. Generic legal forms, lacking proper courthouse stamps or case numbers. "I'll need to verify your credentials," she said firmly. The man's polished manner cracked. His face hardened into something uglier, more familiar. Hollis recognized him now, Doyle Fitch, Iona's stable foreman. She'd seen him lurking at the edges of previous confrontations. "Enough games," he growled, shoving past her toward the back room. "We're taking that mutt." "The dog is evidence under court order," Hollis said, planting herself in his path. "Touch that kennel and you're interfering with an investigation." Fitch's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "Move, or I'll move you." A metallic click froze him in place. Wren stood in the doorway, weapon drawn. "Let her go," he said quietly. "Now." Fitch released Hollis with a snarl. "This ends tonight." He spat. "One way or another." He backed toward the door, eyes glittering with malice. "Should have taken the easy way out, Doc. Now you get to learn the hard way." When he was gone, Hollis rubbed her aching arm, mind racing. "That wasn't a legal move," she said. "That was pure muscle. Iona's enforcer." Wren agreed grimly. "Question is, what's worth this much force to hide?" From the back room, the shepherd whined softly. When Hollis checked on him, he pressed against the kennel bars, trying to reach her. His dark eyes held a knowledge she couldn't yet decipher, but one thing was clear. Keeping him alive might be the only way to uncover the truth. She settled beside the kennel, one hand through the bars to scratch his ears. The pup leaned into her touch, alert but calmer now that she was near. Whatever secret he carried, whatever danger still lurked outside, they would face it together. The morning sun barely touched the clinic windows when the door burst open with enough force to rattle the glass. Cyrus Kindred filled the doorway, his tall frame stooped with a mixture of grief and fury that seemed to age him beyond his late 50s. His usually pristine rancher's attire showed signs of hasty dressing, shirt partially untucked, boots dusty. "Where's my dog?" he demanded, voice hoarse with emotion. "Who do you think you are, hijacking my business decisions?" Hollis kept her stance relaxed but professional behind her desk, hands visible on its surface. Years of handling frightened animals had taught her the value of projecting calm in the face of agitation. "Mr. Kindred," she said evenly, "I'm glad you're here. There are some things you need to see." "I don't need to see anything except that pup returned to my custody," he snapped. "Some backwoods vet doesn't get to override my ranch's protocols." "Actually," Hollis reached for a folder, "I'm following your protocols exactly." She lifted the leather collar from her desk drawer, holding it where the morning light caught the engraving. "Your brand's policy is quite specific. No euthanasia without owner's signature. Policy on file. Report injuries." Cyrus's weathered face flushed darker. "That note gave authorization—" An unsigned note delivered by an unidentified courier. Hollis interrupted gently. "That's not protocol, Mr. Kindred. Not for a Y4 branded animal worth $15,000. Something flickered in his eyes. "Surprise?" She pressed on, laying out photographs across her desk. "These burns don't match a simple barn fire. See these patterns?" Her finger traced the evidence. Linear scorching along the back, consistent with a directed flame. And this? She held up a small evidence bag containing black residue. "Is accelerant residue we found in his fur." Cyrus scoffed, but Hollis noticed his hands weren't quite steady as he gripped the edge of her desk. "You're seeing conspiracies where there's just tragedy. That fire was an accident." Then explain the tempered glass fragments embedded in his coat. Hollis said quietly. From a specific type of container, perhaps? The color drained from Cyrus's face as he stared at the photographs. His fingers brushed one, showing the distinctive shards. That's impossible, he whispered. From the doorway, Wren's steady voice cut in. The magistrate doesn't think so. That's why there's a hold order on the pup as material evidence. Cyrus's head snapped up, noticing the wildlife officer for the first time. His expression hardened. This is private property matter. It's a potential arson investigation. Wren corrected, his tone respectful but firm. Chain of custody has to be maintained. This is absurd, Cyrus growled, but the earlier fury had dimmed to something more uncertain. I demand that animal be returned to my ranch immediately. Hollis met his gaze steadily. I can't do that, Mr. Kindred. Not legally, not ethically. Someone tried to destroy evidence by killing this pup. Someone staged a fake authorization. Someone who knew your protocols well enough to try to use them as cover. The implications hung heavy in the air. Cyrus gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. You're suggesting someone at my ranch. I'm suggesting you look carefully at who benefits from rushing this death. Hollis said softly. Who pushed for immediate euthanasia before you could be properly notified? Conflict played across Cyrus's face, pride warring with dawning suspicion. His shoulders sagged slightly, making him look older, more vulnerable. My reputation is worth protecting, Hollis finished, which is exactly why this needs to be done properly through official channels. Let us investigate. Let us find the truth. Wren moved closer, his presence steady and grounding. No one's attacking your ranch, Mr. Kindred. We're trying to protect it, and you, from whoever really set this in motion. Cyrus straightened, some of his natural authority reasserting itself. I want daily updates on the pup's condition, he said stiffly, and access to all findings. Of course, Hollis agreed, within the bounds of the investigation protocols. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Dr. Ray. His voice was rough with emotion. That breeding pair, they were more than just valuable stock. If someone deliberately... He couldn't finish the sentence. I know, Hollis said gently. We'll find out what really happened. You have my word. After he left, Hollis sat heavily in her chair, the tension draining from her shoulders. He's shaken, she murmured. The evidence got through to him. Question is, Wren replied, what will he do with those doubts? And who at that ranch is going to panic when they realize he's not as certain as he was? Hollis nodded, studying the photographs spread across her desk. The proud rancher's reaction had confirmed her growing suspicion. Someone close to Cyrus Kindred had orchestrated this cover-up. Someone who knew the ranch's procedures inside and out. Someone who never expected a small-town vet to question an order that came with the Kindred name attached. The pup's life wasn't the only thing at stake anymore. Whatever truth lay buried in the ashes of that barn fire, it was big enough to drive someone to murder. And now Cyrus Kindred himself was being drawn into the web of deception, whether he wanted to be or not. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Hollis's office windows when heavy footsteps announced Cyrus Kindred's return. His earlier rage had settled into something more controlled, but no less intense. Without preamble, he placed the leather collar on her desk. Explain this, he demanded, tapping the metal plate where the policy number was engraved. This predates the fire by months. Why would anyone bother with that detail for an emergency situation? Hollis picked up the collar, turning it to catch the light. The engraving was precise, professional, not the hasty work of someone responding to crisis. That's exactly the question that's been bothering me, Mr. Kindred. This wasn't done in a panic after the fire. Someone had this made well in advance. She laid out several documents on her desk. Copies of insurance policies, ranch procedures, medical records. Look at the language here. she said, pointing to a specific clause. No euthanasia without owner's signature. Word for word what's on the collar. Not ranch shorthand or general practice, the exact policy wording. Cyrus leaned forward, frowning. What are you suggesting? Someone with access to these documents, intimate knowledge of your policies, prepared this collar deliberately. They knew exactly what language to use, what numbers to reference. Hollis met his gaze steadily. This wasn't reactive. It was preventive. Insurance against liability if something were to happen. The room grew very still. Wren moved from his position by the door, laying out the evidence bags containing the accelerant residue and glass fragments. The physical evidence supports it, he said quietly. This wasn't a random accident. Cyrus sank into a chair, his face ashen. The policy documents, they're kept in the ranch office. Access is restricted to senior staff and family. His voice roughened. Iona handles most of the paperwork these days. She insisted on modernizing our filing system when we married. The courier who brought the pup in was acting on someone's instructions. Hollis pressed gently. Someone who knew your procedures well enough to try to use them as cover. Someone who could write a convincing order that wouldn't raise immediate red flags. Understanding dawned in Cyrus's eyes, followed by a pain so raw it made Hollis's chest ache. She's been pushing to expand the breeding program, he said hoarsely. Wanted to take out additional insurance on the stock. I thought she was just being thorough. The collar tells us this was planned, Hollis said. The fire wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination. And this pup, she gestured to where the shepherd lay watching them intently, was meant to be silenced before anyone could look too closely at what really happened. Cyrus stared at the documents spread across the desk, decades of pride and certainty crumbling. His hands shook slightly as he picked up the collar again. All this time, right under my nose. The pressure to euthanize came from her, Wren noted. Hard and fast before you could be properly notified. Why the rush if there was nothing to hide? The breeding pair, Cyrus whispered. They were irreplaceable. The insurance payout would have been... He couldn't finish the sentence. Hollis watched the proud rancher struggle with the devastating revelation. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his marriage, was being rewritten in front of her eyes. The enemy wasn't fate or accident, it was intimate betrayal. I need to... Cyrus stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I have to think. Have to. Without finishing the thought, he turned and strode from the office, leaving the collar behind on Hollis's desk. The silence he left behind was heavy with the weight of what had been exposed. The pup whined softly from his bed, and Hollis found herself wondering how much animal instinct had recognized the danger that human trust had missed. She picked up the collar, running her finger over the damning policy number that had finally brought truth to light. Wren moved to stand beside her desk, his presence steady and grounding. He'll have to decide what to do with this knowledge, he said quietly. It won't be easy. Hollis nodded, still holding the collar that had started it all. The evidence was clear now, not just of arson, but of careful calculation. Someone had planned for every contingency except one, a small-town vet who wouldn't look the other way. The afternoon light continued to fade, painting long shadows across the scattered documents that had exposed a scheme months in the making. In his bed, the pup watched the door where Cyrus had disappeared, as if sensing the seismic shift that had just occurred. The truth was out now, but Hollis knew this was far from over. The most dangerous moment is when a cornered opponent realizes they've been exposed. She gathered the documents carefully, making sure each piece of evidence was properly preserved. The collar she placed in a sealed evidence bag, the physical proof of premeditation that had finally brought clarity to a grieving man's eyes. Whatever came next would depend on what Cyrus Kindred did with the devastating truth he now carried. The backlash struck with surgical precision. Hollis was reviewing patient charts when the veterinary board inspector appeared, flanked by 2 deputies. His face was a mask of rehearsed regret. "Dr. Ray, we've received a serious complaint regarding controlled substance irregularities at your clinic." He placed a formal notice on her desk. "An emergency audit has been ordered." Hollis's stomach dropped as she scanned the document. The complaint bore Iona Vale's signature, alleging mishandling of Schedule II drugs. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. The details: supposedly missing vials of painkillers, discrepancies in the log books, accusations that cut straight to the heart of her professional integrity. The inspection team swept through her clinic like a cold wind. They pulled records, checked inventory, and photographed her medication storage. Hollis watched helplessly as they discovered 3 empty vials in a drawer she knew had been clear that morning. The serial numbers matched ones listed in the complaint. "These weren't here earlier," she protested, but her voice sounded thin even to her own ears. The inspector merely noted her objection with clinical detachment. 2 hours later, the suspension notice landed on her desk with the weight of a tomb door closing. "Pending full investigation of these serious allegations, your license to practice veterinary medicine is temporarily suspended." The inspector's words echoed in her suddenly too small office. "You are prohibited from treating animals or dispensing medication until further notice." Before Hollis could fully process this devastating blow, Animal Control pulled into her parking lot. The officer, someone she'd worked with for years, couldn't meet her eyes as he presented the removal order. "Given your suspension, we have to take the shepherd pup into protective custody," he mumbled. "Standard protocol." "Jake, you know me," Hollis pleaded. "This is a setup. That pup is evidence in an ongoing investigation." "My hands are tied, Doc." He shifted uncomfortably. "The order comes from above. The pup will be held for mandatory quarantine at the county shelter." Hollis felt ice spread through her chest as she read the attached documentation. There, in stark black text, was the final trap: emergency euthanasia scheduled for dawn the next day, citing humanitarian concerns and quality-of-life issues. She watched, numb, as they loaded the pup's crate into the shelter van. The young shepherd's eyes locked onto hers through the bars, confused and questioning. Then the doors slammed shut, and the van pulled away, taking with it both the animal's life and her last chance to expose the truth. Caution tape appeared across her clinic entrance. "Closed pending investigation" signs were posted. In the space of one afternoon, everything she'd built, everything she stood for, had been systematically dismantled. Hollis sat alone in her darkened office, surrounded by scattered files and the debris of the audit. The fight that had sustained her through days of pressure and threats felt distant now, hollowed out by the precision of this counterattack. She'd known they would strike back, but the totality of it, professional, legal, and personal, left her reeling. Her fingers found the collar tags in her pocket, the metal warm from being held close. The evidence that had seemed so clear, so damning, now felt useless in the face of such calculated destruction. She traced the engraved policy number that had first alerted her. Something was wrong, remembering the moment clarity had struck. Now that same clarity felt like a curse. The sound of boots on her clinic floor made her look up. Ren stood in the doorway, his face grim as he took in the scene. "They moved fast?" he said quietly. "They took everything, Ren." Hollis's voice cracked. "My license, the pup, any chance of stopping this? By dawn tomorrow." She couldn't finish the sentence. "No." The single word carried steel. "This isn't over. What's left to fight with?" She gestured at the wreckage around them. "They've stripped me of any legal standing. I can't even enter the shelter to check on him." "Then we find another way." Ren's jaw set in a familiar, stubborn line. "You trusted your instincts this far. Trust them, and me, a little further." He pulled out his phone, thumbing through contacts. "I know people who owe me favors. Give me a few hours to work some angles." He headed for the door, then paused. "Don't give up, Hollis." "Not yet." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the deepening night and the weight of dawn's deadline pressing down. Hollis unfolded the collar tags again, running her thumb over the engraved surface that had started all of this. The metal felt like a talisman, a tangible reminder of why she'd taken this stand in the first place. Outside her window, darkness gathered like storm clouds. Somewhere in the county shelter, a young shepherd waited in a strange cage, perhaps sensing the countdown that would end with morning. Hollis closed her fingers around the tags, feeling the edges press into her palm like a prayer coin, willing strength into muscles that felt leaden with defeat. Dawn was no longer just another sunrise. It was a deadline now. For the pup, for justice, for everything she'd spent her career believing in. She sat in her dismantled clinic, holding onto those metal tags like a lifeline, and waited for Wren to return with whatever path he might find through this darkness. The clock on her wall ticked steadily onward, each sound another step toward morning. She had lost everything she'd worked for, but somehow the thing that hurt most was imagining those trusting eyes in the shelter cage, waiting for someone to intervene. The pup had survived fire only to face this sterile end. The injustice of it burned in her throat. Hours stretched by like years. The collar tags grew warm in her palm as she held them, a physical connection to the fight that had brought her to this moment. Outside, the night deepened toward the deadline that waited with dawn's first light. The clinic's back door creaked open at 4:30 in the morning, startling Hollis from her exhausted daze. Wren's familiar silhouette appeared, but he wasn't alone. A tall figure followed him inside, younger than Wren, with features that tugged at her memory. "This is Rowan Kindred," Wren said quietly. "Cyrus's son." Hollis straightened, recognition clicking. She'd heard about the estrangement between father and son, though details were scarce in their small town. Rowan's face carried echoes of his father's stern lines, softened by a shorter beard and younger years. "I've got something you need to see," Rowan said, pulling a thick manila envelope from his jacket. His voice was steady, determined. "Bank records. Transfers from Iona to Doyle Fitch, dated exactly 1 week before the fire." Hollis's tired mind sharpened as she spread the documents across her desk. The numbers were clear, substantial payments moving from Iona's personal account to settle Fitch's long-standing debts. The timing couldn't be coincidence. "How did you get these?" she asked, scanning page after page of damning transactions. "I work at First Western now," Rowan explained. "When Dad married Iona, I started keeping tabs on the ranch's finances. Something felt off about her from the beginning. When I heard about the fire and then this mess with the pup..." He shook his head. The transfers stood out. "Nobody pays off Doyle Fitch's debts out of kindness." Wren leaned over the desk, studying the papers. "This ties money to motive. Shows Fitch was in Iona's pocket before the fire, not just after. That matches your timeline with the collar and policy numbers." "But will it be enough?" Hollis asked, hope warring with caution in her chest. "Already is." Wren allowed himself a small smile. "I took these straight to Judge Martinez. She signed an emergency stay 10 minutes ago, halting any euthanasia until a full hearing." Hollis sagged in her chair, relief washing through her like a wave. "The shelter has to honor that. They don't have a choice. The stay's already been faxed over. I've got dispatch notifying them now." Wren pulled out his phone, checking messages. "We need to move fast, though. Get your medical records together. Everything about the pup's condition, the evidence you collected. Once that stay hits their desk, you can reassert custody as the treating vet." Hollis was already moving, pulling files from her cabinets. Her hands shook slightly as she assembled the documentation. Photographs of burns, glass fragments, accelerant residue, treatment notes, the original collar with its damning policy number. "I'll talk to my father," Rowan said quietly. "Get him to the shelter. If he testifies about the policy requirements and Iona's access to those documents, that would seal it." Wren nodded. "The stay buys us time, but Cyrus's word would lock this down tight." Hollis looked up from her papers. "Will he come? After everything?" "He will." Rowan's jaw set in a way that echoed his father's determination. Dad's proud, but he's not blind. Show him those bank records. Let him see how Iona used his name, his brand, his reputation. He'll do what's right. The sky outside was lightening to pearl grey as they gathered their evidence. Hollis felt steady for the first time in days, grounded by proof on paper and people willing to stand beside her. The pup's face floated in her mind, those trusting eyes that had never stopped watching the door, as if knowing help would come. "Dawn's still our deadline," Wren reminded them, checking his watch. "But now we've got a key to the lock. Let's move." Hollis clutched her files, feeling the weight of documented truth in her hands. The morning air held both chill and promise as they headed for their vehicles. There was still a battle ahead, but they weren't walking into it blind anymore. They had evidence, they had allies, and most importantly, they had time. They split up quickly. Rowan to find his father, Wren to coordinate with dispatch, and Hollis to prepare for reasserting custody once the stay took effect. The parking lot was empty except for their 3 vehicles, engines turning over in the pre-dawn quiet. As Hollis slid behind her wheel, she caught Wren's eye across the lot. He gave her a firm nod, the same steady support he'd shown since that first call for backup. She nodded back, feeling the flutter of nervous energy in her chest settle into focused determination. The shelter was 15 minutes away. Somewhere in its concrete rows of kennels, a young shepherd waited, not knowing that the machinery of justice had finally begun to turn in his favor. Hollis started her engine, the medical files secure beside her, and pointed her truck toward morning. This time, she wasn't just carrying hope, she was carrying proof. The difference felt like armor against the gathering dawn. Hollis gripped the steering wheel tight as she followed Wren's truck toward the shelter. The stay papers sat secure in a folder beside her, their legal weight finally giving her hope. The pre-dawn sky was just starting to lighten when she saw it, a dark plume rising ahead, twisting against the pale horizon. Her heart stopped. No, no, no. She grabbed her phone, hitting Wren's number. "Are you seeing this?" "Yeah, calling it in now." His voice was grim. "Dispatch says fire units are rolling, but they're at least 10 minutes out." As they rounded the final curve to the shelter, orange flames were already licking through the roof of the intake wing. A familiar pickup truck sat abandoned near the entrance, Doyle Fitcher's vehicle. "He's burning it all," Hollis whispered, horror climbing up her throat. "The dogs, the records, everything." They screeched to a stop in the gravel lot. The shelter's main doors were secured with heavy chains, a deliberate trap. Heat rippled the air, and through the windows they could see the interior glowing like a furnace. The sound of barking and howling pierced through the roar of flames. Then Hollis heard it. 3 sharp, distinct barks she would know anywhere. The shepherd pup was alive in there. "We have to get in." She was already running toward the building, Wren right behind her. "This way." Wren veered toward a side maintenance panel. He grabbed a fallen branch, using it as leverage to pry at the metal. The panel groaned, but started to give. A wave of superheated air slammed into them as the opening appeared. Hollis stumbled back, coughing. The interior was a maze of smoke and shadow, punctuated by the desperate sounds of trapped animals. "Here." Wren pulled bandanas from his pocket, handing one to Hollis. They tied them over their faces as makeshift filters. "Stay low. Follow me, and if I say run, you run." Hollis nodded, heart pounding. They broke out the remaining glass in the opening and crawled through into a corridor thick with choking soot. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, making every breath a struggle. Those 3 familiar barks sounded again, closer now, but muffled by smoke and walls. Hollis oriented herself, picturing the shelter's layout. "Intake wing, north side. We need to get through the main corridor." They crawled forward, using the wall as a guide. The metal sang under the heat, too hot to touch directly. Ahead, orange light flickered through the smoke like an evil aurora. Hollis counted cage doors as they passed, calling out to the animals inside. 412, 413. Her voice was raw from the smoke, but she needed the numbers to track their progress. Her fingers, already starting to blister, worked at locks when she could reach them safely. They reached a security gate that should have led to the intake wing. The metal had warped in the heat, jamming it shut. Wren attacked it with a fire extinguisher he'd grabbed from the wall, the impacts echoing through the burning building. "Come on, come on," Hollis muttered, hearing those distinct barks getting more frantic. The smoke was thickening, making her eyes stream and her lungs burn. Finally, the gate gave with a shriek of tortured metal. They pushed through into the intake wing where the heat was even more intense. Flames licked along the ceiling, and visibility was down to mere feet. "Where?" Wren called through his bandana. Another bark guided them. Hollis crawled forward, counting grates until she reached the right one. Through the smoke, she saw the shepherd pup pressed against the back of his cage, terrified but alive. The lock was almost too hot to touch, but Hollis forced her blistered fingers to work it anyway. Each second felt like an eternity as the fire roared around them. Finally, the door swung open. The pup lunged forward into her arms, trembling but trust overriding fear. His fur was hot to the touch, but he was breathing. Hollis clutched him close, feeling his heart hammering against her chest. The ceiling groaned ominously above them. Wren grabbed her shoulder. "Time to go, now!" They crawled back the way they'd come, faster now despite the precious burden Hollis carried. The smoke seemed thicker, the heat more intense. Each breath was agony. The pup buried his face in her jacket, shaking. Behind them something crashed, part of the roof giving way. The sound of collapsing timber drove them forward through the choking darkness. Hollis's world narrowed to the next foot of space, the next breath, the warm weight of the pup in her arms. Sirens wailed closer now, but they were still too far to help. This was down to them. 3 lives connected by trust and desperation, fighting their way through a corridor of fire toward a square of grey dawn light that seemed impossibly distant. The sound of approaching fire engines grew louder as they pushed on through the burning shelter. Every breath was a battle now, the smoke threatening to overwhelm them despite the bandanas. But they kept moving, driven by the precious life Hollis held and the growing thunder of collapse behind them. The smoke-filled corridor groaned with the building's death throes. Through the haze, Hollis heard it first, the deep, splintering crack of timber giving way above them. Her instincts kicked, in before her mind could process. She lunged forward, shoving the pup's crate clear just as the ceiling beam crashed down. White-hot pain exploded through her shoulder as the beam struck her instead of the crate. Her knee hit the concrete floor hard enough to send shockwaves up her spine. The impact drove precious air from her lungs in a gasp that sucked in more smoke than oxygen. But the pup was safe. That was what mattered. Through tears of pain and smoke, Hollis saw the shepherd's chest heaving in short, desperate gasps. The sound had changed, gone high and whistling. Her medical training kicked in instantly, recognizing the signs of critical airway compromise. The smoke was closing his throat. Without intervention, he had minutes at most. Despite her throbbing shoulder, Hollis crawled to the crate. Her hands were steady as she reached for the emergency kit always clipped to her belt. The beam's weight across her back made every movement agony, but her mind was crystalline clear. "Wren!" she called through the roar of flames. "I need light!" He was there in an instant, phone flashlight cutting through the smoke. The beam's shifting weight told her he was trying to lift it. "Leave it," she ordered. "Hold the light steady. He needs an emergency track or we lose him." The pup's eyes were wide with panic now, each breath a desperate struggle. Hollis worked with mechanical precision, her movements economical and sure despite the inferno around them. She felt for the landmarks in the dog's throat, marking the spot with her thumb. The scalpel glinted in Wren's light. One clean incision. Blood welled, but less than there could have been. Her fingers found the trachea. The tube went in smooth, muscle memory from countless procedures guiding her hands even here in the choking dark. The pup's next breath came easier. The horrible whistle softened to normal airflow. His eyes found hers, full of trust despite everything. "Good boy," she whispered. "Just stay with me." Wren had gotten the beam off her somehow. Her shoulders screamed in protest as she moved, but there was no time for pain. They still had to get out. The emergency exit was their only chance now. Wren attacked the chains with a crowbar he'd found, each impact echoing through the burning building. Hollis cradled the pup, monitoring his breathing, ready to adjust the tube if needed. Metal screeched against metal as the chains finally gave way. Wren shouldered the door open, letting in a blast of blessedly cool air. They stumbled out into pre-dawn grey, gulping clean oxygen. Movement caught Hollis's eye, a figure sprinting for the back of the building. Even through smoke-stung eyes, she recognized Fitch's bulk. "There!" she called. Wren was already moving. He crossed the gravel lot in long strides, closing the distance. Fitch tried to dodge, but Wren's tackle took him down hard. They hit the ground in a spray of gravel, Wren using his weight to pin the larger man. "You're done," Wren growled, twisting Fitch's arms behind his back. "It's over." Hollis focused on the pup, laying him gently on the ground. Her medical kit was scorched, but intact. She covered his burned paws with sterile gauze, checking the tracheotomy tube's placement. His breathing was steady now, each rise and fall of his chest a small victory. The lot filled with the wail of sirens as fire trucks arrived. Red and white emergency lights painted the smoke-filled sky in surreal colors. Firefighters poured from the vehicles, dragging hoses and equipment. Through it all, Hollis stayed kneeling beside the pup. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse, and every breath tasted of smoke. But none of that mattered. The shepherd's eyes never left her face as she worked, full of a trust that humbled her. A crackle of radio static cut through the chaos. The dispatcher's voice was clear and decisive. Judge's emergency stay order confirmed. Custody of evidence animal maintained under veterinary supervision pending investigation. Hollis let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd done it. The witness still lived, protected by law now as well as by her oath. The pup's tail thumped weakly against the gravel. Despite everything, the smoke, the burns, the emergency surgery, he was still fighting, still trusting, still alive. Emergency crews swarmed around them now. Someone draped a blanket over Hollis's shoulders. Paramedics approached with oxygen masks and supplies, but Hollis kept her hand on the pup's chest, feeling each hard-won breath, each beat of his survivor's heart. Through the growing crowd, she caught Wren's eye as he handed Fitch off to waiting deputies. They shared a moment of wordless understanding, an acknowledgement of what they'd risked and what they'd saved. The shepherd's paw moved to rest on Hollis's knee, a gesture of connection that brought tears to her smoke-stung eyes. Whatever came next, this moment, this life preserved against all odds, made everything worth it. Through the thinning smoke, headlights cut across the shelter's parking lot. Cyrus Kindred's truck pulled up hard, gravel spraying. But it wasn't just Cyrus behind the wheel. Iona sat rigid in the passenger seat, her perfect composure finally showing cracks. The emergency lights painted everything in harsh reds and blues, reflecting off the chrome trim of Cyrus's truck. As he stepped out, his face was a mask of contained fury. His eyes tracked from the smoking building to Fitch in handcuffs, then to Hollis kneeling beside the carrier with Scout. Iona tried to slide out of the truck quietly, but Wren was already moving to block her path. "Mrs. Vale," he said, voice carrying the full weight of his authority, "I'm going to need you to stay right there." She drew herself up, armor-like dignity still in place. "I came to support my husband in this unfortunate situation." "Nothing more." "Then you won't mind if we take a look under your seat," Wren said, nodding to a deputy, "since you're just here for support." Cyrus stepped closer, his weathered face tight with suspicion. "Iona? What's he talking about?" The deputy's flashlight beam caught something under the dash, a dark bottle with a familiar label. Hollis recognized it immediately, the same accelerant she'd found traces of in Scout's fur after the barn fire, the same chemical signature that had turned up in the shelter's initial fire analysis. "Well now," Wren said quietly, "that's quite a coincidence." Iona's mask cracked further, her perfectly painted lips curled into something ugly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This is business, plain and simple. Livestock is meant to be culled when it becomes a liability. A liability? Cyrus's voice was dangerous and low. You burned my barn, my horses. For what? Insurance money. Your precious reputation was already going downhill. Iona snapped. I simply accelerated the inevitable. That mongrel should have been put down immediately. One loose end among many. Hollis felt Scout press closer to her through the carrier's bars. Her hands tightened protectively on the handle as she watched Wren pull out his handcuffs. Iona Vale, he began formally. You're under arrest for arson, attempted murder of a police service animal, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. His voice carried across the lot as he continued listing charges. Cyrus turned to the nearest deputy, his shoulders straight despite the weight of betrayal. I'll testify, he said firmly, about the policy documents, her access to them, the pressure she put on everyone to destroy evidence. All of it. Hollis watched as Iona was cuffed and led to a patrol car, her expensive shoes crunching through the gravel. The woman's cold eyes met Hollis's for a moment, filled with disdain even now. But the power had shifted. Truth had weight and momentum now, backed by evidence and testimony. The emergency stay would hold. Scout was officially protected as a material witness. Cyrus walked over to where Hollis knelt beside the carrier. His face was lined with exhaustion and regret. How is he? Stable, Hollis answered. The emergency tracheotomy is holding. He'll need careful monitoring, but he's fighting. Scout, you called him? Cyrus asked, noting the name on the carrier's temporary tag. Yes, it seemed to fit. It does. He looked at the smoking shelter, then back at the pup. Take good care of him, Dr. Ray. He's earned that much. Hollis nodded, too tired for words. Her shoulder throbbed where the beam had struck her, and smoke still rasped in her throat. But her hands remained steady on the carrier as she watched Wren finish processing the scene. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold above the dissipating smoke. Emergency crews were starting to pack up their gear. The shelter's structure had held, though the intake wing would need extensive repairs. Scout's tail thumped softly against the carrier wall as Hollis prepared to load him into her truck. The clinic waited, with its bright lights and clean air and familiar routines. There would be more battles ahead, court dates and testimony, recovery and rehabilitation. But for now, in this moment, justice had found its footing. Wren walked over as Hollis secured the carrier in her truck. Need an escort to the clinic? Please, she said, managing a tired smile, though I think the excitement's over for now. He nodded toward where Iona sat in the patrol car, staring straight ahead. Some people forget that living things aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. Good thing others remember. Hollis climbed carefully into the driver's seat, mindful of her injured shoulder. Through the carrier's bars, Scout watched her with complete trust. She'd earned that trust twice over now, first by refusing to break her oath, then by following him into the fire. The morning air was starting to warm as they pulled out of the lot, Wren's truck following close behind. Hollis kept one hand on the carrier as she drove, feeling each breath, each heartbeat of the precious witness they'd fought so hard to save. Not just evidence now, but a survivor. A fighter. Scout. The road stretched ahead toward the clinic, toward healing and hope. Behind them, the sun rose fully over the shelter, burning away the last traces of smoke and shadow, leaving only truth in the clear light of day. The aftermath unfolded like a slow exhale after holding breath too long. In the district attorney's office, charges accumulated with methodical precision. The evidence against Iona Vale and Doyle Fitch formed a damning tower of documentation. Financial records, accelerant traces, witness statements, and photographs of destruction that couldn't be explained away. Hollis sat in her clinic office, reviewing the formal letter from the veterinary board. Their apology was printed on heavy cream paper, each word carefully chosen to acknowledge their error in judgment. They had reinstated her license with full privileges and added a commendation for extraordinary dedication to professional ethics under duress. The letter trembled slightly in her hands, not from emotion, but from the lingering weakness in her shoulder where the shelter beam had struck. A knock at the door drew her attention. Cyrus Kindred stood there, his tall frame stooped less by grief now and more by humility. The proud rancher had been transformed by recent events, his face carrying new lines of wisdom earned through hard lessons. "Dr. Ray," he said, stepping inside. "Got a moment?" Hollis gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Of course." Cyrus settled into the seat, his weathered hands clasped in his lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the breeding program. About how things went wrong." He met her eyes directly. "I'd like you to oversee the rebuild." Hollis's eyebrows rose. "The whole program." "Everything." He nodded firmly. "We're starting fresh. Transparent practices, humane conditions, proper documentation. No more cutting corners or looking the other way. I want it done right this time. That's a big undertaking." Hollis said carefully. "It is. But you've proven you know the difference between right and wrong, even when it costs you. That's the kind of oversight we need." He pulled out a folder. "I've drawn up a preliminary proposal. Take your time reviewing it." As they discussed the details, Scout's nails clicked on the clinic floor as he made his rounds, checking on the overnight patients. The young shepherd had recovered well from his injuries, though a few patches of fur still showed the silver marks of healing burns. His presence in the clinic had become a comfort to other animals. Something about his calm resilience seemed to ease their fears. Later that afternoon, Hollis finished the last piece of paperwork that had been weighing on her heart. The adoption forms for Scout lay complete on her desk, every line filled with careful certainty. She traced her fingers over his new collar, freshly engraved. Scout, Dr. Hollis Ray. The old Y4 brand tag had been retired to evidence, along with its complicated history. The day's last light painted long shadows across the clinic's front porch as Hollis settled into her favorite chair. Scout sprawled at her feet, his chin resting on her boot, finally able to sleep deeply without startling at sudden noises. The bandages on her shoulder peeked out from her rolled-up sleeve, a reminder of what they'd both survived. Familiar footsteps approached, and Wren appeared with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed one to Hollis before taking the chair beside her, their shoulders just touching. No grand speeches passed between them. They'd moved beyond the need for words. When his hand found hers in the gathering dusk, their fingers intertwined with the ease of puzzle pieces finding their match. The victory wasn't something that would make headlines or earn trophies. It lived in quieter moments, in Scout's steady breathing as he slept, in the dismantling of carefully constructed lies, in the future that stretched before them like an open road. Hollis had changed through this journey, transformed from someone who defended animals by professional duty into a protector guided by deep conviction. Her world had simultaneously narrowed to what truly mattered and expanded to embrace those who stood beside her through the fight. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, a gentle benediction over this new beginning. Scout stirred slightly in his sleep, tail thumping once against the porch boards as if agreeing with some pleasant dream. Hollis squeezed Wren's hand, feeling the answering pressure of his grip. Steady, sure, and real. This was her victory, not in grand gestures or public acclaim, but in the quiet certainty that she had stayed true to her principles when it mattered most. The underdog and the veterinarian who refused to back down had found their way forward together, supported by those who recognized that some battles were worth any cost. As twilight settled over the clinic, Hollis felt the rightness of where she had landed. Scout's gentle snores mingled with the evening crickets, while Wren's thumb traced lazy circles on the back of her hand. Here was her truth, her future, her family, built not on compromise or convenience, but on the bedrock of unwavering conviction and hard-won trust. The stars began to emerge overhead, ancient and constant, watching over this small corner of justice made real through determination and courage. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about standing firm when it mattered, about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about building something honest from the ashes of deception. Scout shifted in his sleep, pressing closer to Hollis's feet as if to anchor himself to this new reality. She reached down with her free hand to scratch behind his ears, feeling the smooth leather of his new collar. The pup who had arrived on her doorstep as evidence had become so much more, a symbol of resilience, a reminder of purpose, and now, officially and forever, family. The evening deepened around them, peaceful and profound. No more words were needed. The victory spoke for itself in the quiet contentment of the moment, in the warmth of joined hands, in the steady breathing of a dog who had found his way home. The underdog and the vet who, Wouldn't Fold had written their own ending, one marked not by fanfare, but by the simple triumph of doing what was right, no matter the cost. The weeks following Iona and Fitch's arrests brought a strange quiet to Maple Ridge. Hollis reopened her clinic doors, but the familiar routine felt different now. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow at dusk, carried echoes of what had happened. Clients trickled back slowly, their reactions as varied as autumn leaves. Some hung back in doorways, whispering about the vet who'd defied the kindred empire. Others stepped forward with firm handshakes and quiet words of support. "Takes guts to stand up like that," one old farmer said, hat twisted in weathered hands. "Ain't many would have done it." Scout's recovery became the center of Hollis's days. The young shepherd grew stronger, his burns healing to pink scars beneath the new fur. He shadowed her through the clinic, alert and protective, as if determined to return the favor of salvation. His presence drew smiles from even the most hesitant visitors. But alone at night, doubt crept in like morning fog. Hollis would lie awake, shoulder aching where the shelter beam had struck, replaying every decision. The professional reputation she'd spent years building now carried an asterisk, the vet who'd gone against protocol, who'd challenged authority. Fire haunted her dreams, hungry flames devouring barn walls, smoke choking the shelter corridors, Scout's desperate barks cutting through the roar. One quiet Tuesday morning, the clinic bell chimed. Hollis looked up to find Rowan Kindred in the doorway, his father's tall figure behind him. Scout's tail wagged once in recognition, but he stayed close to Hollis, watchful. "Doc," Rowan said, then paused, searching for words. "We wanted, that is, Dad and I." Cyrus stepped forward, his proud bearing softened by something new, humility perhaps, or hard-won wisdom. "What my son's trying to say is thank you, for seeing what we didn't, for standing firm when it would have been easier to look away." "Pride's a dangerous thing," Cyrus continued, his voice rougher now. "Nearly let it blind me to rot right under my nose. Could have lost everything, not just stock, but family too." He glanced at Rowan, years of distance bridged by shared truth. Rowan cleared his throat. "We're starting fresh at the ranch. New policies, transparent breeding program. No more shortcuts, no more looking the other way. And," he smiled slightly, "maybe healing more than just the business." The weight Hollis had been carrying, the doubt, the questioning, began to lift like morning mist in sunlight. Her fight hadn't just been about one dog or one fire, it had been about standing against corruption that poisoned everything it touched, about making space for truth to take root and grow. Scout pressed against her leg, warm and solid, as father and son spoke of their plans. The old ways would be dismantled, piece by piece. New foundations would be laid, built on integrity instead of expedience. And perhaps most importantly, a family fractured by pride might find its way back together through shared purpose. As she listened, Hollis felt the last echoes of her fire dreams begin to fade. The cost had been high, in pain, in reputation, in peaceful nights, but the return was beyond measure. Here was healing that reached far beyond clinic walls, touching lives she'd never expected to impact. Here was proof that standing firm could ripple outward, creating space for change and renewal. The morning light streamed through the clinic windows, touching Scout's scarred coat with gold. He gazed up at Hollis with complete trust, the same trust that had guided them both through smoke and flame, to this moment of quiet victory. Spring sunlight streamed through the clinic windows, casting warm patterns across the examination room floor. Hollis held Scout's leather collar in her hands, fingers tracing over the old engravings that had once marked him as mere livestock. The engraving tool hummed softly as she carefully etched new letters into the smooth metal tag. "Scout, Dr. Hollis Ray," she whispered, testing how the words felt on her tongue. No more policy numbers or brand markings, no more ownership claims steeped in cold business transactions. This was different. This was family. Scout sat patiently at her feet, his intelligent eyes following her every move. His coat had grown back thick and healthy, covering most of the scars from that terrible night. Only a few marks remained visible, badges of survival that told their shared story. With gentle hands, Hollis slipped the collar back around Scout's neck, adjusting it carefully. He lifted his chin, as if proudly wearing his new identity. The metal tag caught the morning light, the fresh engraving gleaming. The screen door creaked, and Wren's familiar footsteps crossed the porch. "There's our stubborn patient," he said with a warm chuckle, watching Scout immediately flop onto his side, refusing to practice the sit command they'd been working on. "He knows exactly what he's doing," Hollis said, unable to hide her smile. "Every time we work on training, he suddenly develops selective hearing." "Smart dog," Wren replied, but his tone shifted to something more serious. He moved closer to Hollis, his presence steady and grounding as always. "You know, watching you stand your ground through all this, it changed things for me too." Hollis turned to face him, seeing the depth of feeling in his eyes. "I was starting to think integrity was just a word people used when it was convenient." Wren continued. "Then you came along and refused to back down, even when it could have cost you everything. You didn't just save Scout, you saved my belief that doing the right thing still matters." Without need for grand speeches or declarations, Hollis reached out and took Wren's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, comfortable and right. Scout pressed against their legs, completing their small circle of trust. Through the clinic's front windows, they could see the distant shape of the Kindred Ranch. Construction crews moved steadily across the property, rebuilding what the fire had destroyed. Cyrus and Rowan worked side by side these days, their shared vision of transparent, ethical breeding practices replacing the old ways of doing business. The morning light caught Scout's new tag again as he settled at Hollis's feet, finally relaxing into a doze. His breathing came easy and deep. No more smoke-scarred struggles, no more fear. He was home. Hollis squeezed Wren's hand, feeling the rightness of this moment. She had once stood alone against powers that seemed insurmountable, armed with nothing but her conviction and professional oath. Now she stood surrounded by allies who had become family, Wren's unwavering support, Scout's loyal devotion, even the renewed respect of the kindreds. Her small act of defiance, refusing to end an innocent life, had rippled outward, reshaping not just her world, but touching everyone around her. Love, trust, and conviction had proved stronger than greed and corruption. As Scout's gentle snores filled the peaceful morning air, Hollis knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.